Here with Adam Conrad today at the Staffing Show. Super excited to have you here. I've known you for a long time, and it's a pleasure to have you joining us on the podcast today. So with that, Adam, why don't you give a little bit of a background on kind of who you are and your story in staffing?
Yeah, no, and David, thanks for having me, man. It's been a great few years we've known each other, and really appreciate you having me on and able to share some insights. But I've been in the staffing industry, I think 20 years now. So it's funny, I've been through a couple of the downturns and been able to witness that. But essentially, I cut my teeth in recruiting, had moved into recruiting management, and was running operations for a mid-sized staffing firm. A few years back, I left that great career and really saw a need in the marketplace and started Great Recruiters. So, we launched back in November of 2017, and here we are today. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Awesome. It seems like a wild ride. I know you've got a lot of growth happening over there at Great Recruiters. I'm hearing a lot of good things in the market about you guys. So let's start off, I guess, with the thing that's on top of all of our minds, sadly. But how are you holding up? How are things going with? It's been a crazy year. The pandemic's impacted us all. How are things going for you?
I think, like many companies, you can throw your 2020 plan out the window. I don't think that what we set out this year to look like, obviously with everything that's happened, everybody's impacted. So, we're just, I think, really trying to be out there and be a resource. I love this industry. I think a lot of people are impacted by it, and just trying to be as supportive as possible. And I think as a human being, right, with wife, 3 kids, wife's a nurse, we have that going on in our life. I've got 3 kids we're homeschooling, running a business, keeping a team engaged. I think we're all just trying to navigate this thing that used to be called work-life balance. And man, it feels more like work-life blend right now. So we're doing good though. It's just a matter of still trying to just navigate. It seems like new information's coming out every day.
Yeah, I have to say, I know you and I have talked about this on phone calls, but I always think about, I'm here in my bachelor pads running solo through the pandemic, through the social distancing, and every now and then feeling bad about how I wish somebody was here with me. And then I think about your life with homeschooling 3 kids, wife working at the hospital while building a software platform simultaneously. And you got your work cut out for you. So it's amazing to see you moving forward, and you're hanging in there. So
yeah, no, I appreciate. I think what's pretty exciting is I think what we're doing with Great Recruiters is actually helping a lot of companies out right now. And I think it's a really relevant thing that we're doing to help recruiting teams stay connected, celebrate some of those small wins. Wins can be far and few between for many companies right now, but being able to get feedback and know your team's doing good and still putting your brand out there, and management being able to stay connected. I think what we're doing is very relevant for kind of this new kind of workforce we're all looking at. But appreciate that. And the homeschooling stuff, we just try to get math in between sales calls and stuff.
It's always, you got your kids art up there in the back, so it's nice to see that as well. So those of you listening in on the podcast, we've got a Zoom video here, so we're actually able to see each other. So
yeah, my 4-year-old has decided to make artwork and put that in my office. So it's kind of fun, man. It keeps me remembered and centered what's really important and why we're doing all these things. Awesome.
So I guess today's focus for the conversation, we got a couple things. One, we've already, I think it's impossible to talk about anything without talking about what's going on that's COVID related. That's, how we're dealing with the pandemic. But really what I'd like the conversation to be about is, the candidate, talking about experience management today, talking about kind of the future of recruiting, how things are changing with the marketplace. And with that, I think you've done a lot. You've been on this podcast before, and shared some great insights the previous time with, I think you were on with Caitlin. But what have you been up to since? What's changed with kind of in your world, and what's new? So
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening, and I think, this pandemic has really, I think, put a big spotlight on for many firms that may not have embraced kind of, I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot about is digital transformation, right? I think the importance of how you're incorporating technology into your normal everyday lives as recruiter and staffing firms has never been more important. So I think that, part of what we're seeing is this whole idea of, I think what's changed is the ability for recruiting firms to leverage this technology to really expand their reach. Many times you're bound by, the geography you're in, that's your talent pool. And I think what this has created is an awesome opportunity for firms to be able to reach outside those normal boundaries, and attract talent for their firm, across, the world essentially. So, but that's what I see is kind of changed since we last spoke, is really the magnifying glass being put on the need for technology and how technology is really going to become, center to this industry moving forward. Many companies that don't have, applicant tracking systems that allowed them to easily convert to remote workforce, I think struggled a lot more than those that already had that strategy in place.
yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I couldn't agree with you more. And I was just thinking about it the other day. It's like the digital transformation's been happening and has, so you see staffing firms trying to adapt and trying to, I believe the ones that are adopting new technology tend to be the ones that are growing the fastest. But I think that you look at how rapidly we were all forced to just adopt Zoom and Slack or, Teams, whatever it may be. But we just went from kind of a 0 to 100 in terms of what technology are you using and having it be just a absolute core part of your strategy just to move forward, which I know, with great recruiters, when we're talking about the product a little bit, you kind of dig in specifically on some things, but I've heard from people in the staffing firms that they're using it for remote team management, and that it's kind of helping in this time where people are actually trying to manage things remotely.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of firms, and I was part of one, you had your recruiters right next to you. You could hear the conversations. When I was a recruiting manager, I would be able to listen in to, the new talent we hired and help coach and provide those opportunities. And I think that now those companies that are so accustomed to that, I think they got comfort in the fact that great recruiters help them ensure that they're kind of continuing to keep their best foot forward. We were just talking to a client of ours that is, in the healthcare staffing space, and they're still hiring recruiters. And they're like, great recruiters has been critical to them being able to help continue to manage and coach those new hires. Feedback from the new hires is it's been great. I'm able to get up to speed faster. I'm learning from that feedback. So I think one, it's keeping teams more connected. I think when you get positive reviews and feedback, it's something that can be celebrated. So it's keeping spirits high. And overall, I think it's just helping to provide some peace of mind that in this new remote workforce, that their operations are still continuing at the level and degree that they want them to.
Yeah, it's been wild to see everybody kind of shift towards, how do I manage my team remotely? I've talked to a lot of companies. I was talking to a healthcare staffing from the other day. So they've adopted a learning management system, which is something that, you hear about the larger companies doing that, but now it's like, 30-person team and they're adopting LMSs because they need to be able to train remotely. So it's just, it's cool to see the adoption. And where do you think it's going to go, as we shift out, who knows when, but whenever we shift back to the ability to work at the office, how do you think that's going to pan out?
I've talked to some companies that are already putting plans together and understand, what are the new norms when you come into the office. I'm talking to other companies that are really pushing back and saying, do we need the brick and mortar? I've talked to some firms that are like, hey, my lease is up in May and this is working out great. I don't plan on having that overhead of having a brick and mortar. They're accustomed to these Zoom meetings. But I think you need to have clarity of expectations in place. You need to have the tools in place to measure performance, and you still need that piece and those components, those KPIs. But if you have that baseline, if you're hiring based on core values and you have good people, we're in an industry that you don't need to be face to face with anybody anymore. Technology, I think one of the biggest things, video interviewing has been around for a decade now, and it never really caught on, right? People like that face to face, like to shake the hands, bring people into the office. And I think what this has done is really force people to view the way we recruit in a different way, and are looking for ways to say, how do we still ensure the quality of those interactions? How do we make sure that we're still able to create that human to human connection, which is so important as you're building relationships in this business. So I really see that the shift is going to be, some companies are comfortable with bringing things back in house. They want that kind of camaraderie. The funny thing is, I'm also hearing them saying, hey, we're not meeting in conference rooms. If you're in the office, we're going to jump on Zoom meetings. So I kind of laugh. I'm like, well, okay, so we're going to still do what we're doing at home, except we're going to do it in the same building. And I think some companies like that idea, and other companies are saying, you know what, we don't need to do that. In fact, we have an opportunity to expand our operations. I can hire somebody, if I'm like me, I'm based in Detroit, right? I can hire somebody in the West Coast, East Coast. Maybe that opens up opportunities for me to go get more business. So I think this is actually going to increase competition. I think it's going to force the industry as a whole to level up their quality of what they're doing. And I think the expectation of what a recruiter does is going to start shifting. Candidates are looking for somebody they can trust and who can be more than just a paper pusher.
Yeah, it's as crazy as it's. I feel like any recession forces the companies to kind of adapt quickly. The ones that survive, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's really tough times for a lot of people right now. My heart goes out to a lot of people that are looking for work, and it's tough times. But I also, I think it's actually Caitlin on my team who said, there's always opportunity in chaos. That there are. For those of us that can find the way, that there are opportunities for us to move forward. The one thing that you mentioned on I'm shifting gears a little bit, but the talking about people going back to work. I've heard more staffing CEOs talk about the ones that said they would never do a remote workforce are like, holy shit, this works. Like, this works. We may not need the office anymore. Like, I would not be long on commercial real estate right now. Like, commercial real estate is something that's not I think people realizing how work can be done and what technology allows us to do is pretty crazy. So
yeah, in the Metro Detroit, obviously we're, a lot of the staffing firms around here are heavily tied within the automotive industries, right? And so I was talking to an engineering recruiter. He was part of a layoff. There was workforce reduction. And what's interesting is you've got this very interesting piece happening on the West Coast with a lot of automotive stuff and technology, and had an interview that probably wouldn't have happened if it weren't in this remote workforce. So actually his opportunities increased because of this, and the idea that I can function here in Michigan and support, companies in California just as well as, supporting a company here locally.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild what we're able to do. And I think that, you brought this up as well, but, hearing people, it's like, all my recruiters had to be in Detroit. And now it's like, do they? Or do you hire the best recruiters across the country and just have them tap in remotely? That all of that said, I don't know if you're here yet, but I just saw an article on Nat Geo the other day about Zoom fatigue. And I'm there. I'm like 5 hours of Zoom a day, and I'm like, oh man, like at least I'm ready for the in person. I can't wait for a conference.
I know, I'm with you. I love meeting with people face to face. I love that. I really do. I think that I don't want to see that get replaced, but I think certainly this has shown us that we can not skip a beat. If we can't replace that. And speaking of the conferences, it's interesting. I think you're starting to see, different opportunities with some of these big conferences where we meet people face to face. I think what we're going to see is a different way to connect, a different way to expand that, have more people involved. Conferences are sometimes limited by, time and have the travel expenses. And now having online conferences is a way that maybe you can connect to a larger audience. And for those firms that normally didn't go to those conferences, a way for them to participate now without having to, make those travel arrangements.
Yeah, well, I think if nothing, I've thought about this a lot on the conference front, obviously with the Staffing Hub Live being on the forefront for us, but the knowing that the conferences that are shifting to digital, if they shift to digital this year, figure out that model, next year they might have a live and digital version. If they're able to pull two out, it gives the ability to potentially expand the product offering and to your point, make it so that we can potentially connect with more people throughout the year and bridge the gap. I mean, there's some interesting opportunities coming out of it from that front for sure.
And on that, I mean, I think it'd be awesome if I'd love to get back to the face-to-face conferences for those that want, but I mean, man, wouldn't it be great to be able to live stream those presentations and get a broader audience and really be able to, I think this is going to create opportunities that otherwise weren't really being thought of. So I do think the sharing of information is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, so shifting gears a little bit here, back to kind of what your core is, I think, it's interesting. We're talking about the experience that we're all living through right now, how we're shifting to Zoom and, what our, I guess, collective lives are during this COVID-19. Where do you, I guess, kind of tell me a little bit about how you define experience management, what it is and why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hear candidate experience, right? You hear that a lot, it matters. And to me, your reputation is created from the experiences that you make. And, to me, experience management is being able to get insight into how you're providing a service. How am I recruiting an individual? Am I doing those things? So to me, it's staying connected on the front lines in real time of, those experience that human beings have working with the human beings in your company. I think you look outside, there's experience management as it relates to technology platforms and how was your experience, walking into the store. And for me and where I see recruiting is it's always been a very human to human centric business. So Great Recruiters is 100% focused on how one human being has an experience with another, because, if you have a bad experience, that bad experience is going to fall on your brand, right? So if I have a bad experience with you, it's not going to be David I had a bad experience with. I'm going to say, don't go to that company. If I have a great experience and this is recruiting, candidates follow recruiters. They don't necessarily follow staffing firms as much, right? If I create a great experience with David and David moves somewhere else, that's where my experience is. And so we want to be able to capture that in a way that helps to combat, I think, a lot of the negative reviews and reputation that you see out there. I think what exists today is not centered around what it's like to work with a staffing firm. It's what it's like to work inside a staffing firm. So many of the review sites that exist outside of Great Recruiters are not even focused on the experience somebody has throughout the staffing process. And that's where Great Recruiters really comes in, is to capture that real-time insight with how your recruiters, how your sales teams are engaging with the people that they serve.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about the experience and that how candidates definitely, the brand gets the bad rap, and they just don't work with that recruiter. But we see it on the referral front too. It's like people, they're not coming in and saying, hey, you got to work with Adam, or you've got to work with Great Recruiters. It's you've got to work with Adam. Adam's my person. He's gonna help you out. He'll hook you up. And that's I think on the reputation side, knowing what your recruiters are doing on that front. So I mean, you were a recruiter for years. Tell me about what are some of your stories in terms of how did you manage that experience in your day to day?
Yeah, when I started, really poor. To be honest, I'd love to say, man.
Let's hear your worst story. Let's hear a failure and a win.
Yeah, my failure was my first day getting a stack of resumes and a job order for a PLC controls engineer at TNAP, Toledo North Assembly Plant, and my training was, hey, so call these people that you have no idea what they do and ask them if they'd be interested in this job and read this job description. And, it was like, that was the first couple of years of my career. It was very transactional. And, it left me, it just left me feeling like I wasn't adding value to it. And I think when I got into recruiting management and the light bulb went off, I really realized that it wasn't about the transaction of, are you a fit? I put the job order first. And I think that was the problem, is that I was just focused on that job order. And what that did is it eliminated all the opportunity for me to create relationships with all these great people I spoke to that might just not have been a great fit for the job that was in front of me. And the switch for me, David, came when I realized that it wasn't about the job. The job came second. What came first, and this is what I always said to the recruiters that I was coaching and training, is you've got to put your agenda second. You got to learn about the candidate. You have to put them first, learn about them, because you know what? If you treat them well, if you create a great experience, and this ties into your referral piece. Some of my best sources of referrals came from people I never placed. I just treated well. I treated them well. They knew I was there for them. I wanted the best for them. And when their friends were looking for work, they're like, hey, don't go to the person that just, got lucky and got me a job. Go to Adam, who's going to help you out. And if he can't help you out, he's going to point you in the right direction. So for me, that was the big shift. And as that happened, that's where I started seeing the economic return come. I had a candidate I placed 10 years direct hire. And 10 years later, and I'd stayed in contact, and 10 years later, he ended up becoming a hiring manager. And the first person he called was me. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Yeah. And he said, man, I remember the way you treated me through that process, and now I'm hiring, and I want to make sure the people I hire have that same experience that you shared with me. And so I think that's the bigger picture of looking at recruiting as a long-term, go to Simon Sinek's, infinite game.
Yeah.
I started playing a different game. I started playing the long-term game, not the short-term gain. So long-term game, not the short-term gain. And in the long run, I think it worked out better for me and everybody that I worked with. And, the placements came, the income came, all of those things came, but it went to putting their agenda above my own.
And so tell me, and especially for there's a lot of recruiters that listen to this podcast. How'd you do that? What are the any specific lessons, takeaways, things that you implemented when you shifting from transactional to long term? What was your secret?
It was relationship management. There's two things that really come to mind that I think were huge on relationship management. I was sharing this with Rob Mann in a podcast recently, and we implemented Fanatical Friday. And Fanatical Friday was a program that we put in place that we reached out to. So we were set up that our recruiters manage that relationship with the candidate through placement, through redeployment. We always maintain that relationship. So we would call all the people we placed every Friday and just check in. And, we would also do that with candidates that we just wanted to stay in contact with. So it was an intentional investment of time to maintain relationships that weren't set up to just fill a job today, but it was looking at the long-term game. That's one of the things we did. The other piece we did.
Well, actually, let me just, yeah. So with that, when you're calling them, what type of, you just calling saying, hey, just checking in. How are you doing? Did you have the script like that? How structured was it? What detail? I want to get the details on this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, it was like, oh man, this is great. Thanks, Adam. And then week 2 came and it was like, oh, you're calling again. And then week 3 came and it was like, hey, what's up? And then week 4 came and it was like, oh, hi, Adam. I didn't even have to say anything. They just answered and they knew it was noon. And so, Mary would just say hi and it became a joke. And although it was a joke, they knew that no matter what, every Friday, they were going to hear from me, right? They knew that there was a connection. So those conversations, became a little bit more, less structured. It was just, hey, just checking in. Yeah. Hey, this is our weekly call. And some people were like, hey, look, Adam, I'm good, man. You don't have to call me every week. And that's cool. That's what you do is adjust, right? You adjust to each person. So the program, shifted based on the needs of those individuals, but the intention was there. The focus on making sure that they're taken care of was there. And they knew that they always had a lifeline. And through that, we got referrals. We got leads from other opportunities in the organization. We gained insights on things that were going well that, much like managing a team, if you're not asking, you just don't know and you can't make assumptions. So that's kind of how the program ran. Awesome. For the most part.
Awesome.
The other piece we did is leveraging technology. We were one of the first companies to use HereFish, right? So we used HereFish to automate and help automate the nurturing of candidates that we engaged with. So a recruiter typically can only manage maybe 50, maybe 100 different relationships. But if you've been doing this business for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, think of all the great people you came in contact with. That's where technology can help you keep that, conduit alive and that relationship of just being able to do check-ins and stuff. So that's where we leverage technology to help, nurture some of those relationships.
Well, I feel like, that ties in with how your tool does now, but I think HereFish is a great example of how you can, nurture the relationship, make sure you're staying in contact. But I like the, with you guys, I always think of your tool as basically keeping your finger on the pulse without having to make sure, like, the check-ins are good, the personal check-ins, it's always nice to have that conversation. But there's an aspect of that where you might be checking in, they're telling you it's great because people don't like conflict on the phone. But you send them an email and ask for feedback. They know that, it's amazing the difference that you get with written feedback versus when you give somebody a chance to kind of speak their mind versus what they're going to tell you on a phone call. So I think there's layers to that check-in and how you connect and keep your finger on the pulse as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the piece that we're doing, that we realize there's a lot of great things that are happening with recruiters. And if you just have an internal program or you're using a Survey Monkey, those things are great. Like, I'm not going to take anything away from, if you're asking for feedback, you should be, and you should be doing it regularly. You should be, you should have that process in place. What we do is we ingest that information though, and we provide our clients with ways to promote that information. Let other people know that you're doing a great job. And it helps with attracting internal talent. The people want to work for a company that has a good vibe, good experience. It helps from an attracting talent and getting referral standpoints, right? You're able to combat some of the negativity that just, I think, naturally exists out there for many staffing firms. And, so we just take that information, help you capture it and easily promote it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just kind of going down your career, I always think it's interesting to learn how people got to where they are. So what was the, from recruiter to, CEO of a software platform, what was the inception point for Great Recruiters? Where did the idea come from, and how did you kind of make that transition?
Ignorance is an awesome thing to have sometimes,
I feel you on that one.
Looking back, you don't realize how difficult it is to build a product, build a team, get people to adopt. Many of the things that we were doing are going across the grain. There's a concept of, I don't want people to know who my recruiters are, to people that are like calling us up and saying, hey, we want to turn on our recruiter profiles because we're all remote and we need a tool to help our recruiters market themselves and the great work that they're doing. And so what's really interesting, just in the short time, 2+ years that we've been around, the idea, I think people understand the power of being able to give you those tools. So for me personally, I've always been a big advocate of technology. I've always been an early adopter of technology. I love how technology has complemented the recruiter. I think a few years back, you heard about how automation and technology and robots were going to replace recruiters. And I never believed it. And I still don't believe it. And, what I saw was an opportunity. It excited me to take kind of what I was doing and what I was building for one company and be able to go share that with the industry. For me, this, I go back to, you Google recruiters are, and it's like evil, liar, waste of time. And I know that's not true. And so what I wanted to do was really,
I guess it depends.
Well, it does depend.
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I put you on the spot. There's some transactional ones out there. You mentioned the not wanting to get the recruiters' names on the out on the internet. I've talked to some CEOs who are like they will never. had a company say, we don't want to pay, we don't want to use referral management because then we would actually have to pay these referrals out. And I'm like, wait a second, you're trying to get referrals and offer money and then not pay it. So there's some people out there, but that's the minority in the industry. Thank God.
True.
So,
But I, you know what, man, I felt the need, I felt the nudge to go do something different. I mean, I wanted to help the industry as a whole. I wanted to help put quality, and a quality experience at the top of this industry. It doesn't have that kind of reputation. And I really wanted to do something about it because I think that it's just going to help everybody else out. There's so much pain throughout the recruiting process from end client to recruiter to candidate. And really, I think that the simplicity of asking for feedback, creating transparency, sharing that is going to help those people who are doing a great job earn more business. And I think it's going to put pressure on those companies that aren't to say, I better get on board. I better start doing it or else I'm going to become pretty irrelevant pretty fast.
Yeah, I think there is, it's definitely easy to see that if you're not adopting things that are going to help you be more efficient, but also I think the transparency piece, I mean, as we move, the world of Yelp, right? Like it was like 10 years ago, you're online, you go out to dinner, rarely are you looking online first, right? Like you're going to go to the places, you're going to talk to your friend, but everything is now getting to a spot where it's reviewed online. Well, back in the day when we were allowed to go out to eat, which was a big portion of my nightly my dinners. Even though I live in Denver and I go out frequently, I look at Yelp almost every single time, try to figure out what's best, what's new. And I think that transparency, it's like you always tend to see the digital transformation happen in like consumer markets, like hotels and restaurants. Happens in consumer markets, slowly bleeds into the B2B and kind of the different industries. I think staffing is, almost it's not catching up, but there's a lot of opportunity in staffing to kind of take the modern way of doing business and apply it, which I think it's happening. It's just a matter of how fast.
You right now you have a very wide array of different types of staffing firms. You have some second gen firms, you have some first gen firms that are kind of still old school, right? I mean, I think if they still had the color dot system on a folder, they would still do that. They don't want to embrace technology. And I think you have others and technology platforms that are really looking to change the industry fundamentally and really help, I call it you want to Uberize this a little bit. In fact, Uber's in the talent acquisition business now, right?
Right.
And what's funny is Uber rates the drivers, right? I mean, they're rating the experience that somebody has. You have it in the real estate business. I mean, people want to know who are the people that I can trust, and they trust people based on what other people's opinions are of that experience. And that's what we've brought to the recruiting industry.
Yeah, I feel like you can rate almost any experience you have on the consumer side. And I think that's anytime you're dealing with somebody who you're actually building a meaningful relationship, if you're making a big decision, if you're buying a house, a realtor, if you're, the bigger the decision, the more important it is to know that you're working with somebody you trust. That said, I would not mind the capability of rating some call center people directly at different times. The Chase call center after at this period of my life would be an okay one to have some ratings, some direct ratings. But I think, you're talking about people's careers. You're talking about what they're going to be doing for their job. And they're working with a recruiter. They're putting their trust in what they're going to be doing with their life for a period of time into that recruiter in many ways. So it's kind of crazy to have to go into that blind. So I think there's a lot of value in how you're kind of bringing that to the forefront, bringing transparency to the market.
Yeah, and it's transparency internally. There's things that recruiting managers we hear all the time are learning things about their recruiters, and customers say, you know what, we looked at this because we love the promotion piece. We love to be able to share stuff. She's like, but one of the biggest value adds that we saw was we're gaining so much insight on our recruiters, and we're actually able to help them be better. They're able to compare, like, how are top rated recruiters? Let's dig in a little bit to what their talk track looks like. What are some of the things that they do? How can we help adopt that? You go back to learning management. That's where our knowledge base comes in, where we provide recruiters the ability to share their tips and best practices with their teammates. If the organization is doing better, everybody is going to win. And that's what we want to do. And that's where we started, was elevate recruiter performance through real-time feedback. And we've moved into the ability to help them now create that transparency by promoting it out there to the public.
That's awesome. It's a awesome way of moving the industry forward, not just helping staffing firms individually. And with that, I'm kind of going through your, I guess, your career, and now I'm always wondering what, and I guess this has probably changed quite a bit in the last month and a half, but what's your daily routine look like? Or let's do a pre-pandemic, and then maybe pandemic as well, because I know our routines are all shifted so drastically in the last month.
Well, I think first of all, the days my wife works, it's I got to get the kids going. I got to get them set up. My day starts a little bit later. I got to get them set up with the schoolwork and make sure that they're good. I got to lock them in the basement and make sure they have enough food, so they can survive the day. But I mean, for me, number one thing has been I have daily pulse of the team every day. Start off the day. We start off with good news. You know what? We want to share good news. We just want to connect. We then IDS, right? And so our rhythm is good news, IDS, and what do you need from me? What do we need to do to move the needle forward this day? What issues do we need to solve today? What do we need to do to get this day moving forward? And everybody kind of gets their marching orders, and they're not marching orders for me. They're telling me, I'm there to serve them. And it's, how can I help you guys? And so that's it. And we stay connected through the Zoom thing. For me personally, what I've done is, I got turned on to the book, The One Thing. And it's helped me, I think as an entrepreneur, as a startup, we have so many different hats that we're wearing. I'm bouncing between marketing and sales to product to customer success to just business operations. And what it's done for me is I dedicate the first part of my day after that team meeting focused on the number one thing that needs to be done that day. And I try to clear all my plate. I block it off on my calendar, and it allows me to just focus on that. So that's kind of what my routine is. And then the afternoon is, it's jumping on calls and talking to customers and doing product stuff and having great conversations with folks like yourself.
Awesome. Jumping back a little bit to just kind of like the market, as you were talking about that, my brain jumped back to what are you seeing with staffing firms that are winning during this time? What do you see a difference in kind of those that are excelling and those that aren't? I know a lot of it has to do, a lot of it's luck. There's some luck involved in all of this but are there things that any specific takeaways or things that you're seeing people kind of implement that's moving the needle?
I think the number one thing was the companies that already had the ability. I was just talking to somebody today, customer today, and they're like, Adam, we didn't miss a beat. I've had, they're based here in Michigan. He goes, I've got recruiters in Austin, San Diego. We're already geographically dispersed. We have no need for brick and mortar. We were actually already operating in this way. And I think those firms, there was less of an impact up front because their normal daily routines didn't change. It was so I think those early adopters that figured out that, hey, long-term, this is kind of the way the world is also moving. We're a little bit less impacted by that change of working from home. The companies, and it's tough to say like what's working right now. I think it matters on what your geography is. I think it matters of what industries that you serve. I think everybody's impacted a little bit differently. So, it's been hit or miss, but the companies that I think missed less of a beat were the ones that were kind of already set up this way and already embraced the technology and had those pieces in place. I talked to somebody that the recruiter had I think dial in through a Citrix mainframe dump terminal or something. And I mean, be honest with you, I wouldn't know how to operate. Like I would be like, oh my gosh, I need to, but now they're like, okay, we need to change ATSs. Like our core system, which is our business, needs to be flexible, to be accessible anywhere, anytime. And I think that's going to open up opportunities for a lot of the, SaaS-based platforms out there.
Yeah, what's interesting is like everybody's shifting to remote, and I've been, we have a few people here in Denver, but been running a remote company for over 6 years now, and the watching all of the companies go through the same kind of stumbling blocks. Like there's kind of like a set number of things that you kind of got to get used to. And one of the things that I think we're all feeling right now, at least maybe I'm making some assumptions, but is just really increase in workload, is because once you shift away from having work is at work and now work is just, I'm working from wherever. I know that with my team, we actually had to really like make rules of engagement for the different types of communication channels so that we weren't overloading and overwhelming everybody at all times. So it was like, you know, a lot of people felt like, oh, I'm getting Slack messages at 10 p.m. I've got to respond by 10:05. And it's like, no, you also have to live. Like you can't, this isn't, I'm not coming into your office and saying, hi, I'm sending you a Slack message. It's supposed to be asynchronous, right? And
Right.
I think that it's unique to watch kind of all these companies have this drastic shift from, you know, the ones that were just traditional in the office and seeing how that's going. So it definitely makes sense though that the ones that are set up for it ahead of time are moving forward faster right now. So are there any tools or things that you've implemented with your team that you feel like are worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know what's cool, and I think you guys have done this as well, is leveraging, you know, conversational channels like Slack, right? Getting our customers on Slack channels and just trying to open up that door of communication a little bit, I think has been big.
Yeah.
Zoom, obviously, we do a lot of demos and presentations, so for us, this wasn't something new that we adopted, but are certainly using a lot more. I think that you know, really, those are the two core things. I mean, our core kind of CRM is kind of the voice of truth. You know, so I think as we continue to grow as a business, I've always looked at that core system as a source of truth. If it's not in there, it didn't happen. You know, I think that comes to just being able to workforce management, having clear expectations of what needs to be put in where and what does it mean, because you need to be able to track the activities still. You have to. I mean, we're running businesses. We need to know what it is. It keeps everybody accountable. If somebody's not able to jump in, that information is there. And so definitely that whatever core system it is, you need to have a shared system where you can have that, you know, core foundation of truth. But other than that, you know, the Zoom happy hours have been something new. I've never played games and had the cocktail hour virtually. So that was definitely new to me. And it's good. I think what I've seen changed is conversations have become, I think, people's layers are, you know, the personas, the work personas are kind of blending. It was like, it was work-life balance, then it was work-life blend. Now it's like work-life blur, right? Everything's kind of blurring together. So I do think one of the pieces that I'm looked at, and it hit on me as you talked, is probably working more than I ever have, you know, and I think it's because it's always on, it's right here. And I've talked to other business owners like, my gosh, I need to create more defined lines because I have to recreate that balance now between work life and family life. And if you talk to my family, they'd probably say, you know what, there's days, but I've shifted and I let my team know to shift. Hey, look, you have kids. I understand. I have kids. Like, I get it. You're now a teacher. And I think that's something that business owners are really going to need to consider as they're telling people they need to come back to work, is ask themselves why do they need to come back to work in the office if I'm able to function and I'm producing. And I think there's going to need to be more flexibility for those folks that have children at home. You know, maybe, you know, you're in a situation where you can't send your kids somewhere else. You need to be there. And so, you know, giving them the flexibility to be able to shift with their hours. Like I said, the days my wife works, I start work a little bit later, but I also work a little bit later. So I think those new norms of the 9 to 5, they got to get thrown out the window.
Yeah, it's I think the new norm definitely we need to look at being more flexible going forward. I think that honestly, I think that the companies that don't adjust going forward, and when people have realized that this is a way to work, are going to have trouble hiring people. I think it's going to be difficult if they're not making those adjustments. And also, you brought up the Zoom happy hours, and I feel like that's it's funny. I was supposed to have my 10-year MBA reunion last week, and we did a Friday night happy hour with my closest friend, and it was hilarious though. It was like, I haven't talked to these people, you know, there's some of my really close people, but we catch up on the phone, you know, once a quarter, and we did the Zoom happy hour, and it's like, holy shit, like why did it take, like we could have been doing this every year for the last 10 years. Like why is it taking this moment to make us realize that we have the ability to connect and be a little bit more human, and we can do Zoom happy hours. It's so that's one of the silver linings I feel like with this whole thing is like, I feel a little bit more connected. You know, I feel like people are being a little bit more real, and we're getting a little bit more connected. We're seeing the inside of each other's homes. So there's, you know, trying to find the positive in it. But you know, that's, yeah.
I feel that as well. And I think that, you know, it's interesting. I think it's amazing how social distancing and putting up, you know, technology to allow us to facilitate is actually making us a little bit more human, getting back to our core a little bit more. I was talking to someone's like, hey, when my daughter comes in the middle of a sales call because she just needs to have a starburst, that's acceptable right now. You know, the question
Yeah.
is, how long will that be acceptable for? Like right now is kind of a joke. Everybody understands. They're like, oh, here's a guy. He's, you know, he's dad, his daughter's home. I'm trying to do this, but it's acceptable. What I hope is that there's an element of that we don't forget these times, and we don't forget that there's a lot more than just the work face that a lot of us know from each other. There's a lot of family stuff behind it as well. And I hope that we don't forget that when all of this kind of is over, whenever that is. But it has been one of the cool side effects that I think people are just being a little bit more, their guards down a little bit more, and they're just being a little bit more real.
Yeah. And I also think that, to your point on like not forgetting about it, I'm never imagined how grateful I would be just for the next beer that I have at a bar next to some random person with a random conversation. That's going to be a very happy person. That's not something that I used to, I took it for granted. The little things, so many little things that we take for granted in our day-to-day lives, that I'm hoping that going forward we'll take a step back and realize how valuable those things are. It's a matter of how long can we keep that gratefulness in place. I will tell you, I think I was on a run on a call with you when you heard this, but every night here in Denver, they're doing the entire city howls to like, you know, say that we're still part of the pack. I get chills every night, like every night, 8 p.m. that happens. And it's like, I mean, it's also great being somebody, I'm a very social person. I'm sitting here in my, my condo, just going a little bit insane. So it's nice to actually feel the human connection, feel people. It's like a way of reaching out and hearing it. It's nice. So.
There's always a silver lining in everything. And I think that's it, is like, I think the people like coming out of this, it's those that are already thinking about what are the opportunities that exist, you know, from a culture standpoint, you know, how do I adapt this? Like, okay, your culture might've been that brick and mortar for many, many years. There might be things that are just instilled with I'm a big high fiver and hugger, right? Maybe that's not happening as much, but how do you shift those cultures? I think that's what's cool is I'm hearing the conversations now. They aren't the conversations that are like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? They've shifted. It's looking forward. It's saying, all right, we're resilient. How we're going to get through this. What is it going to look like? What do we have to do? And that's what's exciting for me is some of even the innovation that's going to come out of this that we probably aren't even realizing right now. I think is exciting because as you put stress on things, that's where the greatest change takes place. And I think that this kind of stress is going to help make our industry better. I really do. I think that, you know, we are going to come out of this as a stronger industry as a whole. I think it's going to open up opportunities for people that would not have existed pre. And I'm excited to see what those changes are.
Yeah, you know, it's as you say that, the stress thing, it reminds me, I think it's Ray Dalio is one of the guys. I love his LinkedIn. He wrote the book Principles, but he's got a saying. I think it's pain plus reflection equals growth. And it's like, you know, that's what we're going through right now is this like major painful moment. And if we can take a moment, reflect on what's happening, how things are going. And like, I think there's a lot of opportunity hidden, you know, behind the lines with some of this, but we're both optimistic people. I think every day coming up with my next silver lining for what good is going to come out of this. Cause it's definitely tough times, you know, it's difficult. So trying to focus on what can we hold on to move us forward and what positive things can come out of it is super valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that have been, impacted, and I think that's just where, putting their agenda ahead, right? Really listening to people and trying to be a resource. And if you can't help somebody directly, my gosh, put them in contact with somebody who can help them with some resources. I think that's where, as just a community, we need to just help support everybody. Everybody's in a little bit different situation. You don't know what situation people are in. So I think just having that empathy is really important.
Yeah, and it's cool seeing the ASA, SIA, Bullhorn, a lot of these, they're all releasing COVID related resource pages. They've got we've got one up on Staffing Hub as well. We're basically just trying to get information out there, help the community move forward. I think Clear Edge Marketing even is doing some stuff along those lines as well. But I really love seeing the people trying to help people, in a time of need. That feels good as well. So it's kind of moving on to wrapping this thing up. But one last question for you. Where do you? This is a difficult one with this period. So, but what's next in staffing?
What's next in staffing? I think we're going to see staffing get split into two sections. One is where technology is going to replace the recruiter. I think there are a number of jobs, roles that technology is going to help better quickly facilitate, whether it be in the gig economy, whether it just be more transactional type positions, things where if I'm looking to pick up, I think you're going to see a lot more of those platforms coming out of this time. I think the other shift is that you're going to see, I think you're going to see the recruiter role and the pressure of quality. And I think you're going to see expectations increase as an industry of what it means to be a recruiter. What are those expectations that we should have? And I think it's much like I've shared it with you, kind of the role of the realtor. The role of the realtor used to be your MLS listings, right? It used to be the value was you'd show me the homes. Now I'm calling up the realtor and I'm saying, I want to see these 5 homes. Give me insight, right? Help me make a good decision. Tell me about the neighbor. Tell me about the things that I can't find through that research. And I think that's the role recruiters will become as that advisors. The ones that are going to be successful and continue are the ones that are going to be a value add and shift the value between it's not anymore handing you that job order. The job orders are out there. Help me make good career decisions. And I think that's where I see recruiting getting shifting and already starting to see it. And I think those are the recruiters and those firms that embrace that and find good ways to continue being value added, more consultative type approach are going to grow and succeed on the other side of the business.
Yeah, and it's interesting to say that it's like as the industry matures, the starting point is getting somebody the information. As information is freely available and candidates can see, they can find jobs, they can find all the job descriptions they want, they can find salary rates. It's getting to a spot where you are the expert and you are providing. It's really moving to the higher end of the relationship. So I think I see that as a major trend as well. And it's one that if you look at other industries, it happens over and over again. And this is just, it's happening in staffing right now. So it's kind of a matter of who sees that and kind of gets ahead of the game for it. So.
As an industry, there will be more transparency than there ever has been, and it's going to happen. Yeah. And I think you started seeing transparency long ago with the VMSs and bill rates, and that started and it caused pain, but people realized, how that's helping to facilitate things. And I think we're going to become an industry that is just going to become a little bit more standardized with a little bit more quality control around it. And I think it's just going to benefit everybody so much more when that exists.
I couldn't agree more. And Adam, listen, it's absolutely great having you on the podcast
really
today.
Appreciate it.
Nice seeing your face, having a conversation with you, and getting your insight on the industry. Really think what you're doing is fantastic. You are actually helping shed light and bring transparency and move an industry forward, which I think is just an admirable thing, and it's nice having you on here today.
Thank you. Well, David, it's always great catching up, and if one person got one good thing out of this, then it's a success. So I hope this was I hope my insight it helped somebody, and I appreciate you inviting me on. It's always great to catch up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for those of you that are listening, if you want to continue the conversation, we've started a Slack group, Staffing Hub Slack group. We've got well over 100 staffing firms in there. It is still just getting off the ground, so conversations are a little light, but we are moving that forward. Invite you to join it. You can find it on staffinghub.com. And you can it's a free Slack group that everybody can join. And also, we did just release a COVID sponsored report about how staffing firms are responding to the pandemic. So hopefully that's something of value for everybody as well. But thanks so much again for your time, Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks for all of you that listened in. And until next time.
Thanks so much. Have a great one.